Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland Podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @symbol CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 17th of January 2024. From the news section. Skye lifeboat rescue after trawler runs aground. An article written by Jodie Harrison and read by me, Corey. A rescue operation was launched after a fishing trawler with 7 people on board ran aground on rocks. 2 RNLI lifeboats and a Coast Guard helicopter went to the scene in Kellerhay Narrows off Skye after the alarm was raised shortly before 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Kyle RNLI lifeboat, which launched in a snowstorm, was the first to arrive, and as the tide came into the Narrows, there were concerns the trawler may capsize as it was being pivoted around and forced further aground. However, as the tide continued to rise, the vessel came off the rocks. The trawler then headed to Mallaig to be inspected for damage under escort by Mallaig RNLI lifeboat, which arrived at the scene at around 6:30 p.m. Jonathan McKinnon, RNLI helm for the Kyle lifeboat, said, "This was a rapidly evolving situation, which became extremely serious when the tide began to force the vessel over. There was the potential for it to go wrong quite quickly, so it was a relief to see the vessel float free 20 minutes later. The 7 crew on the 72-foot, 22-metre fishing boat were not injured." That article was from the Herald Scotland, it was from the news section, it was written by Jodie Harrison, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 17th of January 2024. From the news section. 850k funding to renovate People's Palace in Glasgow. An article written by Gabriel McKay and read by me, Corey. The National Lottery has provided £850,000 in funding for a project to transform the People's Palace and Winter Gardens in Glasgow. Glasgow Life announced on Wednesday that it had secured an award from the Heritage Fund as the first step to a wider £7.5 million award. The iconic building is home to collections documenting the city's social history from 1750 to the present day. The new People's Palace and Winter Gardens will be a dynamic community-led museum and flexible space, which will foster new ways to promote inclusion, access and participation, and minimise its impact on the environment. The development phase will take around 16 months and will facilitate work with Glasgow's diverse communities to discover how the museum can best tell the city's stories, making sure more people's heritage is on display in the refreshed museum. It will lead to a Heritage Fund second stage application, which will secure an additional £6.65 million of support. The cost of the People's Palace and Winter Gardens project is £35.9 million. Glasgow City Council has already committed £2.9 million to the project. A further £11 million contribution will come from Glasgow City Council, while Glasgow Life continues to work with other public and private sector funders to secure the remaining investment required. Bailey Annette Christie, Chair of Glasgow Life, said, "For 126 years, the People's Palace and Winter Gardens has been one of Glasgow's most treasured spaces, but it is now in need of significant investment. This announcement of Heritage Fund support is wonderful and crucial to breathing new life into the museum. While there is still work to be done to secure additional external funding, we can now move forward with this exciting project to restore, reimagine and improve a much-loved cultural and historic asset. We will use all we have learned about engaging with communities, developing innovative digital technology, and designing accessible spaces to celebrate the people of Glasgow and tell the city's stories in a world-class, accessible and sustainable museum. This will bring a wealth of social and economic benefits to the people in the East End of Glasgow and beyond." Eilish McGuinness, Chief Executive of the National Lottery Heritage Fund, said, "I am delighted we are supporting this inspiring project, which is not only about redeveloping a much-loved building, but also rediscovering the story of Glasgow and putting the People's Palace and Winter Gardens back in the heart of local communities. This initial support paves the way for an award up to £7.5 million, which would be amongst the largest Heritage Fund awards made to a single project in Scotland. This reflects our new strategy to invest larger amounts in truly exceptional heritage projects across the UK, supporting our vision for heritage to be valued, cared for and sustained for everyone, now and in the future." Glasgow is also one of the first 20 places around the UK that will share in our £200 million Heritage Places programme, announced last year. Isabel Wilson, Friends of People's Palace, Winter Gardens and Glasgow Green, said, "Today's announcement of National Lottery funding to support the refurbishment of the People's Palace and Winter Gardens is excellent news. Our aim is to advocate for the care, preservation and enhancement of this much-loved museum and glass house. We look forward to working with Glasgow Life, their partners and local communities to renew the People's Palace, a place of Glasgow's social history, and restore the Winter Gardens as a place of botanical inspiration." Councillor Ruairi Kelly, Glasgow City Council's City Convener for Neighbourhood Services and Assets, said, "It's great news that such a significant funding award has been secured for the People's Palace. This award can add £7.5 million to the pot, which would be a massive step closer to the goal of revitalising the People's Palace and Winter Gardens. We remain fully committed to exploring every avenue to raise the remainder of the funding required to bring this major part of Glasgow's working class history back to life. We want to see the People's Palace and Winter Gardens fully restored and functioning as a great cultural attraction for Glasgow's residents and visitors alike." That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Gabriel McKay, and it was read by me, Corey.
From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 19th of January, from the sports section. Cyril Dessers addresses Fabio Silva deal and Rangers silverware bid. Article by Christopher Jack. The collective accolades being more than the individual plaudits for Cyril Dessers. The competition for places at Ibrox is, therefore, essential rather than just welcomed. Dessers put pen to paper on a move to Rangers in the summer, fully cognizant of the pressures that would be on his shoulders and the return that was expected. At times, he has carried more than his fair share of scoring burden this season. The Nigerian would be the first to admit that it hasn't always lived up to the price tag or the pre-season platitudes. A return of 9 goals from 30 appearances is hardly prolific, and Dessers heads into the second half of the campaign with plenty of doubters to win over. The best way to that, of course, is to put the ball in the back of the net. 6 of the goals that Dessers has scored in blue have come under the guidance of Philip Clement. 3 of them, in the Premiership wins over Dundee and St Johnstone, and historic Europa League triumph over Real Betis were scored during a decisive December that has given Rangers encouragement for what could come. With Danilo ruled out for the foreseeable future and Kemar Roofe still beset by injury issues, Dessers will have a significant part to play as Clermont's side look to add to the league title in Scottish Cup to the Viaplay Cup that was lifted last month. Dessers will not be the lone ranger in the final third though. The arrival of Fabio Silva from Wolverhampton Wanderers has given Clermont another much needed option up front, and Rangers remain in the market for further reinforcements. Without them, their chances of success appear slim. Dessers will be ready, willing and able to play his part when Rangers return to competitive action against Dumbarton on Saturday evening. There is every chance that he will miss out on a start and that Silva will get the nod, despite the former Cremonese star netting a neat dink in the draw with the FC Copenhagen at Ibrox. Going forward, the responsibility will be shared and each individual endeavour could prove crucial in the search for team medals. It's part of being at a top club like Rangers, there will always be competition, Dessers said. I think it's only a good thing. I'm not here for only myself, I'm here for the team and I want to win trophies here. I don't care who makes a goal or wins us a game. I just want to win, and that's the important thing. Fabio is a good player and I hope he can help us a lot, but I hope I can also do my thing, of course. I definitely think I'm in better form than the manager. If you look at the split of my stats before the manager came and when he did, I think it is a big difference. I think there is still growth left and I'm working hard every day to get better, in better shape and form, and hopefully we can help the teams win a lot of games. We spoke about my confidence, but at this point we don't need to talk about it every day. He knows what I can do. I know he sees my qualities and now I have to work hard and fight for the team. Dessers has faced many questions over his quality over the course of the campaign, but few could query his commitment to the cause. He's a personable character, and supporters would happily eat humble pie if he was able to turn around his Ibrox fortunes in the coming weeks and months. Clermont has given him his backing. Now, it must be repaid in the best manner possible. A training camp in La Manga last week saw Clermont step up his preparations for the Premiership run-in and Scottish Cup bid. A return to European action is also on the horizon for a squad that could achieve great things together this term. The friendly with FC Copenhagen on Tuesday evening followed a bounce game defeat to Hertha Berlin. The results and the performances in both fixtures mattered little, as Rangers made the most of the chance to regroup and refresh after a hectic few months at home and abroad. That's the case, Dessers said when asked about the importance of time training with Clermont. During the season, especially last month, it's been game to game. Thursday, Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. Now we can work a little more in the details, and I think that's a good thing. It's tough in the body, obviously, to be playing every 3 days. I needed a couple of days rest last week to prepare and recover a little bit. Once you're in the rhythm, it's actually okay, and I think the players are used to it. Like the last months, if you win a lot of games, you have these special nights like Seville or the Cup final. You have, and the extra boost the next day, you don't feel it in your legs. It was definitely hard work in La Manga, but that's what we are here for and what we knew it would be. It's good to be with the team, obviously. We spent a lot of time together in all these European games as well, but in a different setting. A little sun during the day. Work hard, being together, eating together, sleeping, that's it. Obviously, you get closer, and it's a good thing to get this new energy again to go for the second half of the season. A trip to face Dumbarton is not exactly a glamorous way for Rangers to begin their bid for further glories this season. It is imperative, though, that Clermont's side pick up where they left off after a crucial victory over Kilmarnock before the winter break. The first of their 2 games in hand in the title race comes at Easter Road next week. The matches will once again come thick and fast for Rangers, and the opportunity to build momentum and ultimately emerge victorious has presented itself at Ibrox. That's it. The last 2 months have been very good for us, Dessers said. We won almost every game bar one, and we need to keep this feeling going and keep growing. There's still a lot of growth left, I think, for our team, and if we can achieve that, then a lot of beautiful things are possible. And that article was by Christopher Jack. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 19th of January, from the sports section. Hatate a water carrier? Japan's strange use of Celtic stars. Article by Graham McGarry. If it had just been the once, perhaps we could put it down to being lost in translation. Wires can be crossed when taking quotes from foreign publications in their native tongue. After all, a fact many a player has used as a convenient get-out clause when their gripes about their club or manager to the local press have made their way back to where they routinely ply their trade. So, the first time Ryo Hatate was described by Japan manager Hajime Moriyasu as a water carrier, I was prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt. But Hatate himself has now alluded to this being his ascribed role within the Japanese squad. I think it's important to get my own results, but my ability to carry water is also being evaluated, Hatate told Japanese football website Gekisaka. Utilising Hatate, one of the most creative and arguably the most technically gifted midfielders in Scotland as a water carrier, is a little like asking Michelangelo to paint your downstairs lobby. Sure, he'll do a decent job, but it seems like a waste of his talents. That is, if Moriyasu uses him at all. Hatate, along with Celtic teammate Daisuke Maeda, was an unused substitute in the Samurai Blues opening Asian Cup win over Vietnam on Sunday. Japan take on Iraq this morning, and it remains to be seen if either man gets a run out. It all adds fuel to the notion that Moriyasu is on a different page to Celtic when it comes to what their Japanese contingent can offer, both when Ange Postecoglou was in charge and now under Brendan Rodgers. For Moriyasu, Hatate is a water carrier, while at Celtic he's a lockpicker. Maeda is a central striker for his country ahead of Kyogo Furuhashi, while at Celtic he plays off the wing in deference to him. And Kyogo himself barely gets a sniff for Japan, while he's the focal point of Celtic's attack. While all three players undoubtedly love representing their country, and would much rather be called up than not, I'm not sure that the Celtic coaching team would necessarily feel the same way. And, while Rodgers was gutted for Kyogo on a personal level not to make their Asian Cup squad, he would have been just as confused and perturbed that Hatate was included after just 19 minutes of competitive football in the preceding 2.5 months. Particularly if his primary role is a squad filler, or, indeed, if he does get the chance to play as a water carrier, or even from the left wing, as he did in a friendly against Tunisia in October. In mitigation, Moriyasu does have a wealth of talent available to choose from, but there must be a feeling within the Celtic camp that representing Japan, or not as the case may be, is an unwelcome distraction for the trio. Hatate, though in typically humble style, is happy to accept his station. First of all, what can I do for the team? He said. The best thing to do is do my best for the team, and in addition to that, I want to get results such as goals. I think if you do it for the sake of others, they will follow you, so I hope I can do my best to help the team win. The team's training has been very intense, and I feel like my condition is improving. That last nugget there is at least encouraging from a Celtic point of view. They would undoubtedly have preferred to monitor Hatate's ongoing quest for full fitness and match sharpness at close quarters at Lennoxtown, but at least that work is going into his legs, and their sports science team will no doubt be receiving his data. Unfortunately, improving his match sharpness is the one thing that could have been guaranteed had he stayed in Glasgow, and that is now out of the club's hands. The Scottish Cup tie against Buckie Thistle this Sunday, for instance, would be a perfect opportunity to step up his game time. Alas, we wait to see if Hatate and indeed Maeda will get their opportunity. All going well for Japan, they could conceivably be away until mid-February, and it is likely they will both be called upon at some stage should their nation go deep in the tournament. For Hatate though, that might mean the odd cameo from the bench here and there over the next 3 weeks, and given he's only just returned to action, that is far from ideal. And that article was by senior sports writer Graham McGarry. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 18th of January, from the sports section. Igas Viatek survives scare against Daniel Collins. This article is unattributed. An emotional eager Swiatek survived a major scare to defeat Daniel Collins and reach the third round of the Australian Open. The world number one lost to Collins in the semi-finals in Melbourne 2 years ago, and it appeared history was about to repeat itself when the American took a 4-1 lead in the deciding set under the roof on Rod Laver Arena. But Swiatek responded with 5 games in a row to claim a 6-4, 3-6, 6-4 victory and set up a clash with Czech teenager Linda Noskova. The Pole sobbed into her towel at the end of the match, and she said with a relieved smile, "I was at the airport already. I wanted to fight until the end. She played perfectly, so I knew it would be hard for anybody to maintain that level. I waited for the mistakes to come. I'm really proud of myself because it wasn't easy." Collins walked straight off the court into the press room, where she revealed this will be our final season. "I don't really know exactly when I will stop, but this will be my last season and I'm really looking forward to that," said the 30-year-old, who also made the semi-finals in Melbourne in 2019 and reached a career-high ranking of 7. "I have other things that I'd like to accomplish in my life outside of tennis, and would like to be able to have the time to be able to do that. Obviously, having kids is a big priority for me." The semi-final loss was the only one of 5 previous meetings with Collins that Swiatek had not won, and she lost only 1 game the last time they faced each other in Cincinnati last summer. The top seed edged a tight first set, disrupted by a brief rain break, but the aggression of Collins was troubling the top seed, and the American, who also made the semi-finals here in 2019, won 5 games in a row to take a 5-1 lead in the second set. She showed nerves, hitting 4 double faults as she feared to serve it out the first time of asking, but she was rock solid on her second opportunity. Swiatek found return drilled back at her feet, and she was staring at the exit door when Collins broke serve twice in succession to lead 4-1 in the deciding set. However, the American tightened up with the finishing line in sight, and Swiatek came roaring back, clinching victory on her third match point with a backhand into the corner. Swiatek applied strapping under her left knee at the start of the third set, but she played down concerns, saying, "I've been struggling a little bit with my knee since the WTA finals in Cancun. I have ups and downs, but it's not like it affects my game. You don't have to be worried." And the author of the article is unattributed.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 17th of January 2024 from the Voices section. Worried about scam calls? Here's how to tackle them. This article is by Alison Rowett. On BBC 4 tonight, there is a rare chance to see Memento Mori, the 1992 adaptation of Muriel Sparks' novel. You will recall the tale of elderly Londoners receiving anonymous phone calls in which they are reminded they must die. Naturally, they are alarmed. Sparks' classic was published in 1959. If it was set today, the conversation might run as follows. Caller: "Good morning. Is that Mrs. Elderly?" Mrs. E: "Yes." Caller: "Hello there. I'm calling from the Bank of Blah Fraud Department to let you know we've detected a problem with your account. We can fix it, but we need your help, and we need to act quickly. Have you got a pen and paper?" You can guess the rest because doubtless you or someone you know has had a version of such calls. Most people will hang up immediately, as you should, possibly with a few words of salutation to help the caller on their way. Some are more trusting and end up paying for their misplaced faith in human nature. I know because last week it happened where I live. As they say on the telly, stuff's got real. It began with a message on social media from the local police. Fraudsters were targeting the area with phone scams. Money had been taken, so watch out. Word got round, in some cases by good souls printing out the messages and distributing copies to neighbours, Samizdat style. Hopefully no further harm was done. But what about next time? If only there was somewhere other than the police you could turn to when something is not quite right. Legend has it there used to be such places. Bank branches, they were called. If you have one near you, then cherish it, for like the Amur leopard, it is an endangered species. According to the Union Unite, more than 6,000 bank branches have closed since 2015. The high street near me used to have 5. Now it is 2, and one of them looks like its coat is on a sugary peg. It is when they remove the chairs that you should start to worry. Disappearing branches have gone hand in hand with the push towards online banking. The banks have been at this for years, as have other organizations. I wrote about this last year as part of a complaint about organizations doing away with face-to-face services in favor of call centers. If anything, the situation is becoming worse. Banks in particular seem to be upping the pressure again. Have you tried opening a new account lately? How often have you been told it is digital or nothing? It is tiresome for you and the staff to be asked every time you go in if you have thought about internet banking. If that fails, they try to lure you across with better interest rates or other goodies such as travel insurance. The rates and goodies don't last, but by then it's too late to go back. Another way to encourage customers to go online is to get rid of paper passbooks. How banks hate all that faff of updating the book and running it through the printer. Never mind that you find it easier. In the bank the other day, the talk of the queue was a letter that had gone out announcing the end of passbooks. Somebody said, "We fought them off before and we'll do it again." It is like there is a war going on between banks and those customers, many but not all of them elderly, and some who are vulnerable, who do not want online banking. Good for you if it suits and you never want to go near a branch again. The point is, the customer should have a choice. Whenever I am asked why I don't want to go digital, I mention the risk of fraud, only to be told that online is safer. No proof is ever offered. You simply have to take it on trust. Irony alert. So, let me see if I have this right. The number of bank branches has gone down at the same time as online banking has become more common, and the number of fraud cases has risen. Is it possible the three could be linked? Some banks give the distinct impression that customers are a nuisance. You and your Luddite worries about fraud. Should be grateful there is still free banking. Never mind all those years handing over your money for the banks to make soaring profits. Everything is online now, so get with the program. How patronizing. Of course online is here to stay, but there has to be an alternative. If there is one thing we should know about large organizations and their IT systems, it is that they can go wrong, as with the Post Office Horizon scandal. Who did not shudder at that scene in Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, with the sub-postmaster watching as figures changed before her eyes? Remote control of terminals couldn't happen, said the Post Office, but it could, and it did. Banks are not the Post Office, let's get that straight, but it is worth noting that what made the difference in the Post Office case was people talking to each other, rather like you might call the bank or visit a branch and tell them you've had a phone call asking you to transfer money. It might be nothing, but just in case. It seems to me that would buy a lot of customer loyalty. If they want to show they are community-minded, they should be welcoming people through the doors, not casting them out to the online wilderness. Banks should stop regarding customers who don't want to go online as the enemy. We are not. As for those branches deemed too expensive to keep open, It is not as if the banks are on their uppers. Sometimes it is prudent to invest for the future because situations change. The loss makers of today might be the lucrative hubs of tomorrow. In short, have some faith, much like taxpayers did when we bailed out the banks. Not that long ago. Remember that? That article was by Alison Rowett.
This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 18th of January 2024 from the news section. Jackie Baillie receives damehood from Princess Anne. This article is written by Lauren Gilmore. Dame Jackie Baillie was among 73 people in Scotland who received honours from the Princess Royal during an investiture ceremony at the Palace of Holyrood House. The Scottish Labour deputy leader received the honour for political and public service, and it is understood it makes her the first sitting MSP to either be knighted or given a damehood. Dame Jackie has been the MSP for Dumbarton since the Scottish Parliament was created in 1999, and she became Deputy Labour Leader in 2020. She was named Scottish Politician of the Year 2023 by the Herald for helping to steer Scottish Labour's revival and securing its first Westminster by-election win over the SNP. Upon hearing the news of her royal honour last year, Dame Jackie said it was totally unexpected, and it came as quite a shock. She told the PA news agency, "I understand I was nominated by constituents, and when you have represented people for 24 years, this is such a humbling experience. I was delighted to accept on that basis." Among others to receive honours at the Palace on Wednesday were broadcaster and author Sally Magnuson, who was made an MBE for services to people with dementia and their carers. She founded the charity Playlist for Life in 2013, after observing the effect music had on her mother's dementia. It worked with families and care homes to encourage people to develop a playlist of personally meaningful music for those with dementia. Upon being made an MBE, she said, "It's lovely that this award recognises the restorative power of personally meaningful music to people living with dementia. Through this music, they find themselves able to experience genuine joy and connection again." I'm thrilled to accept the award on behalf of Playlist for Life and the many people who have supported us over the years. Charity campaigner Cor Hutton was also made an MBE at Wednesday's ceremony. Dr. Hutton previously told PA it had taken a wee while for the news to sink in. She nearly died in 2013 after suffering acute pneumonia and sepsis, and as a result she had to have both her hands and legs below the knee amputated. 6 years later, in 2019, Dr. Hutton became the first person in Scotland to receive a double hand transplant, and in the same year she was named Scotswoman of the Year. Dr. Hutton also received an honorary degree from the Open University in 2019. Figures from charity and the emergency services were also honoured at the ceremony. That article was written by Lauren Gilmore. This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 18th of January 2024 from the news section. King Charles to be treated in hospital for enlarged prostate. This article is written by Gabriel Mackay. The King is to be treated in hospital next week for an enlarged prostate, Buckingham Palace has announced. The palace said Charles's condition was benign and he would be having a corrective procedure. His engagements will be postponed for a short period of recuperation. The news came just an hour and a half after Kensington Palace announced that the Princess of Wales was recovering in hospital after undergoing abdominal surgery and would be recuperating and away from official duties for up to 3 months. Buckingham Palace said in a statement, "In common with thousands of men each year, the King has sought treatment for an enlarged prostate. His Majesty's condition is benign, and he will attend hospital next week for a corrective procedure. The King's public engagements will be postponed for a short period of recuperation." It is understood Charles was keen to share the details of his diagnosis to encourage other men who may be experiencing symptoms to get checked in line with public health advice. The King had a series of meetings and events planned at Dumfries House in East Ayrshire on Thursday and Friday, which are now being postponed on his doctor's advice. Guests, including foreign dignitaries and members of the Cabinet, were due to travel to Scotland, and the Palace made the announcement to allow for them to be made aware of the situation. The 75-year-old monarch acceded to the throne just 16 months ago, after spending 70 years as the heir to the throne, and was crowned last May in Westminster Abbey. That article was written by Gabriel Mackay. This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 18th of January 2024, from the news section. Rise in violence expected in Scotland due to social media. This article is written by Katrina Stewart. Scotland is failing to adapt to new, different and urgent online and social media trends that are facilitating violence around young people. A 3-year study has shown that despite world-leading reductions in violent crime in the country, rates remain stubbornly high, with Glasgow seeing more violence than many cities in Western and Northern Europe. Violence reduction has slowed, and the aftermath of COVID-19 has seen swingeing cuts to local services and physical spaces for young people, sending them onto social media platforms where conflict and intimidation is becoming an increasing concern. Experts said that there is a fear bubbling up around the part technology is playing in modern gang culture, and authorities are being slow to respond. The report, Safe Space, The Past and Present of Violence Reduction in Scotland, saw researchers from Edinburgh and Glasgow universities and the Open University interview nearly 200 participants about their experience of violence. Professor Alistair Fraser of the University of Glasgow and co-author of the report said, "The story of Scotland's violence is an important one to tell. Over the course of the last 20 years, we have seen how a growing chorus of support for a public health approach to violence, led by the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, has brought about real change. However, this success doesn't mean the story has ended, and these new trends around youth culture and violence feel different and urgent. Having spoken to many young people, youth workers and practitioners as part of this research, there seems to be a fear bubbling up around the part technology can play in today's forms of violence. The report details a young person telling the research team about arguments starting over the social media platform Snapchat, which has been used by young people to organise gang meetups. He said, "You start arguing over Snapchat, 2 full schemes going at it, telling them you're going to kill them and all that. It's no good, man, it's frightening." Youth workers shared their concerns at the loss of physical spaces for young people to meet and socialise, turning them instead to online spaces. One youth worker said a local youth project had been converted into a COVID-19 testing centre, but instead of reinstating the young person's space, the building now lies derelict. The worker said, "There are these spaces, but they're lying empty, so there needs to be people actually in them and facilitating activities." Another supported this by saying, "If there's nothing in their communities and there's nothing happening, then they're going to build a community digitally." Professor Fraser urged policymakers, social media platforms and youth practitioners to work together and learn from young people about how to create and protect safe spaces between community and digital sites. He said there is a lot of fear about the impact of technology, but it's here to stay, and we need to learn from young people about how to support their safety, both online and on the street. Scotland's Violence Reduction Unit, initially set up to deal with high levels of violence in Glasgow before turning countrywide, has helped shift policymakers and the courts towards a public health approach to tackling the issue. However, academics said there was a gap in any specific research looking at exactly why this approach worked. Rates of violence in Scotland, while still comparatively high, have remained relatively stable for the last 7 years, but appear to be increasing south of the border, which has led to 20 violence reduction units being created in England and Wales. New South Wales in Australia has also copied the Scottish model with a VRU set up there. The report also details that while the overall trend for Scotland is similar to that for other countries, the homicide trend for Glasgow was very different to other cities, especially during a particularly sharp increase between 2004 to 2006. However, homicide in Glasgow fell by 60% from its highest point in 2006 to its lowest point in 2014, while the reduction in London's homicide rate was lower than Glasgow at 48% between 2004 and 2015. The overall homicide rate in Glasgow remains higher than London. The research team interviewed 190 participants, including third sector, healthcare, government, police, youth work and young people affected by violence. Co-author of the report, Dr. Keir Irwin-Rogers of the Open University, urged politicians to back the violence reduction units with long-term funding and support. He said, "We must provide VRUs with the resources and space to focus on the root causes of violence. At the same time, we should recognise that significant and sustained declines in violence will require a long-term, cross-departmental commitment to reducing a range of harms in children and young people's lives." That article was written by Katrina Stewart. This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 18th of January 2024, from the news section. Scottish farmers urged to take part in BirdLife survey. This article is written by Alec Ross. Scottish farmers and crofters are being encouraged to join the Big Farmland Bird Count, BFBC, which takes place from February the 2nd to the 18th. Organised by Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, GWCT, and partnered by NFU Scotland, the count aims to raise awareness of the crucial role farmers, crofters and other land managers play in the conservation of farmyard birds. Martin Kennedy, president of NFU Scotland, said, "Scotland's farmers and crofters have a fantastic story to tell on food production, lowering emissions and enhancing habitats and biodiversity. We need facts and figures to show everyone the journey that we are on, and this invaluable survey pulls together a vital national snapshot of the state of the nation when it comes to our birds. I urge all farmers and crofters to take half an hour out of their busy schedules to enjoy and record the incredible bird life around them." Explaining the role of the survey, Dr. Louise Derard, head of Research Scotland at GWCT, said, "Farmland birds have declined by 63% since 1970 and desperately need our help. With 75% of Scotland's land area used for agriculture, the key to increasing biodiversity and reversing the decline in wildlife is held by those looking after the land." That article was written by Alec Ross.
This is from the Herald Scotland on Friday the 19th of January 2024. From the news section. Glasgow subway services hit by disruption every 6 days in 2023. Exclusive by Craig Williams. The Glasgow subway system suffered disruption on 1 in every 6 days in 2023 on average, a Herald investigation can reveal. Services on the Underground Light Metro system, the third oldest in the world, were interrupted on 58 of the 359 days it operated last year, equivalent to around 15% of its operational time. The disruption ranged from full or partial closures of the inner and outer circles to closures of one or a number of the network's 15 stations. August 2023 saw the worst disruption, with subway services interrupted on 8 separate days that month, including one occasion, August the 25th, where services on the outer circle were suspended 3 times in one day. Factors involved in the disruption to Glasgow subway services last year included essential engineering works, signalling faults, power failures, adverse weather, flooding, and alarm activations. Broken down or defective trains caused the most disruption to services on the underground network, resulting in services being unable to operate fully as normal on 30 days in 2023. Passenger-related incidents caused the second highest amount of disruption to the network by forcing the temporary suspension of either the inner or outer circles, or in one instance the closure of a station, on 8 days last year. The entire subway network was also closed completely on 4 days in 2023 due to continued subway modernisation works. Responding to the Herald's investigation, Glasgow MSP Paul Sweeney said that the unreliability of the transport system underlines the need to accelerate the modernisation of subway infrastructure to bring Glasgow into line with other European cities of a similar size. He told the Herald, "The reported levels of disruption faced by Glasgow subway users is clearly not acceptable, and I would welcome SPT confirming the annual performance of the system since the modernisation programme started in 2011. Clearly the main issue causing disruptions to services is the increasingly defective 43-year-old trains. It has been good to see the new trains enter operation in the last month or so, which should hopefully help to minimise disruption to services. I am looking forward to the phased transition to the driverless capabilities that come with the new trains, so that Strathclyde Partnership for Transport, SPT, can move to longer opening hours to better serve the travelling public." SPT, which runs Glasgow's subway, admitted that the level of disruption witnessed in 2023 falls short of the service all our staff would wish to provide. A spokesperson told the Herald, "The subway operated 359 days in 2023, closing on Christmas Day, New Year's Day, and for 4 scheduled Sunday shutdowns to allow for continuing subway modernisation works. We carried more than 13 million passengers in 2023, and the subway remains an integral part of the transport network in Glasgow. It is wrong to imply that we lost any days of service due to any incident on the subway. Most events only impact one circle at a time, while service continues on the other circle. However, we are very aware of the impact on our passengers when services are disrupted for any length of time or for whatever reason. These can vary from train breakdowns, signalling and power failures, and other operational issues, as well as passenger incidents requiring assistance from colleagues in the emergency services. The current system has been operating for more than 40 years and is unfortunately approaching end of life. We satisfy almost 95% of our timetabled service, in part due to the work and dedication of our engineering and maintenance staff to keep the whole system running, and despite many challenges, including sourcing parts and equipment. The first of our new subway trains are now in service, with more new trains due to enter service in 2024. Installation of our new signalling system is also underway. We apologise to all our passengers for any disruptions they have experienced, which are often only for a short time. last month saw new modernised trains come into passenger service on the underground rail system. The new trains are the next stage in the subway modernisation programme, as SBT works to replace the subway's signalling and communications system. Still to come is the introduction of a new operational control centre, which SBT say will be key to improving the availability and reliability of passenger service. SBT will also be introducing platform screen doors, PSDs, to station platforms. The screen doors will be half height to preserve as much space and openness within the stations as possible, while still maintaining passenger safety and security. That article was by Craig Williams. This is from the Herald Scotland on Friday the 19th of January 2024. From the news section. ScotGov rent rise curbs blamed for forcing landlords out. Exclusive by Martin Williams, senior news reporter. Scotland has become the only part of Great Britain where sales of properties by landlords have gone up, amid claims that government rent curbs are forcing them out. Research from Hamptons, the estate agent, has come as Scottish Government rent rise curbs under the Cost of Living Tenant Protection Scotland Act 2022 have been blamed for encouraging sales, cutting the supply of properties and causing bills to rise during a homelessness crisis which has seen 3 of Scotland's local authorities register housing emergencies. It has been revealed that a December survey of 697 members by the Scottish Association of Landlords, SAL, has warned that the size of the private rented sector is reducing and will continue to drop over the next 5 years, with rent controls and politicians' attitude to the sector identified as key factors. Some 56% of respondents say they are now planning to cut their property portfolio size, and only 9% were planning an increase. Those responding had already withdrawn an average of 6.4% of their properties from the sector in 2023, which suggested that around 21,760 homes could have been lost, around 6.4% of the 340,000 properties in the private rented sector over a year. They say that they would not yet be reflected in landlord registration figures. The Hamptons study shows that Scotland is the only part of Great Britain where property sales by landlords were higher in the year to October 2023 compared to the previous year. It found that in Scotland, landlords were the sellers in 12% of property transactions in the year, 3 percentage points higher than in 2022. In other regions of Great Britain, the rate was either down or flat. A separate study has shown that the loophole in the Scottish Government rent rise curbs has meant average new private sector rents have soared by up to 16% in a year in Scotland. According to analysis by CityLets, Renfrewshire has become the hotspot for rent rises on new tenancies in 2023, as the average bill has risen by 12.9% across Scotland. It comes in the wake of rent curbs, first introduced by the then First Minister Nicola Sturgeon in September 2022 to beat the cost of living crisis. It was replaced by a 3% rent cap for private tenancies only last April, which was to remain in place until September the 30th, 2023. A further 6-month extension was agreed by ministers, meaning landlords with properties within Scotland will continue to face restrictions to rent rises until March this year. But the controls only apply to sitting tenants and do not apply to new rental properties being advertised. They include those properties which have come onto the market after tenants have moved on. The rent cap, while of benefit to many tenants, has been widely blamed for encouraging sales by landlords, reducing the supply of private rentals and causing new rents to soar. In the SAL survey, when asked about their reasons for withdrawing properties, 83% said it was down to perceived hostility towards landlords from government and politicians. Some 75% said it was over concerns to introduce rent controls. when landlords were asked how they will go about withdrawing their properties from the market. For 58% of properties, the landlord would serve notice to evict their tenants. For 29% of properties, the landlord will wait until the tenants choose to move out, and some 22% would be sold to another landlord with tenants in place. Sal says the survey painted a very concerning picture for the future of the private rented sector, and it is certain that the Cost of Living, Tenant Protection Scotland Act 2022 has contributed significantly to landlords' plans to exit the sector and their more assertive approach to rent increases. They warned that it was the most vulnerable in society who will suffer from a reduction in the size of the private rented sector and increasing rents. And Scotland's housing regulator has warned that registered social landlords, RSLs, are facing uncertainty in the national and global economy, which has contributed to the cost of living crisis, alongside what it called significant and sustained cost increases, higher energy costs, higher borrowing costs, continuing supply chain disruption and labour scarcity. The Scottish housing regulator said that they have a reduced financial flexibility to respond to further challenges, which is leading to a reduction in house building, restrictions on maintenance expenditure, and less spending on some of the wider role activities that support tenants and communities. It said that the total number of new units forecast for development in the 5 years to 2028 is just over 26,000, 17% down on the 30,600 previously suggested. Glasgow became the second Scottish city to declare a housing emergency in November amid mounting pressures on homelessness services. A City Council committee agreed the move due to unprecedented pressures facing the local authority. The council had more than 5,200 open homelessness cases and has already called on the UK Government to provide financial assistance, as it expects to see more than 1,400 homelessness applications from people granted asylum before the end of 2023. Edinburgh City Council became the first Scottish city to declare a housing emergency earlier this month. Argyll and Bute did the same in June. According to CityLet's analysis, the rent rise has hit 16% for a typical 3-bedroom property, the highest leap registered, with monthly rent at £1,014. The analysis examining the last 3 months of 2023 shows that a typical 1-bedroom property in South Lanarkshire is costing £576 a month, an annual rise of 15.2%. Annual rises for a 1-bedroomed property in Edinburgh and Renfrewshire have gone up by 14%, although the monthly bill in the capital comes to £1,052, £451 more than the West of Scotland region. The typical 3-bedroomed property in West Lothian has seen a 13.1% annual rent rise, costing £828 a month, while a 4-bed in Aberdeen has seen a 12.4% hike, with average monthly bills at £1,783. The Scottish Tenants Association, SDO, said that changes were needed to ensure that everyone is protected from rising rents. We have returned to the era of Rachmanism, where unscrupulous private landlords are hiking rents to ridiculous levels in Scotland, exploiting private tenants, especially financially vulnerable young people, using the large loopholes in the failed Scottish Government rent cap policy, the group said. Sean Clerkin, campaign coordinator of the SDO, said, "There's been an immediate introduction of watertight rent controls in Scotland, covering the private rented sector, ensuring that rent controls are not tied to tenancy agreements, but to the property itself, eliminating exorbitant rent hikes by Rachman landlords. Only by the state intervening can we protect financially vulnerable tenants." Tenants' Rights Minister Patrick Harvey told the Herald, "Our temporary emergency legislation has led the way at a time when rents have been rising across the UK, striking an important balance between protection for tenants and the rights of landlords. The latest Scottish Landlord Register data show the number of registered properties for rent in Scotland between August 2022 and November 2023 has increased by 1.5%. Since the 1st of April 2023, private landlords with a tenancy subject to the rent cap have been able to increase in-tenancy rents by up to 3%, or can apply to Rent Service Scotland for approval of an increase of up to 6% in specific circumstances. Anywhere else in the UK, private tenants have faced the double impact of uncapped rent rises, both during and between tenancies. Rental market challenges are being felt across the UK, with the cost of living increasing pressure on tenants and landlords. We will introduce a housing bill to deliver a new deal for tenants, including the introduction of long-term rent controls for the private rented sector, creating new tenants' rights. That article was by Martin Williams.
The Herald on the 19th of January and the Voices section. Scottish Education, an eventful but concerning week, by Catherine Salmond. Cuts to university places, courses under threat, growing waiting list for preschool speech therapy, potential strike action. It's been an eventful, if not concerning, week for Scottish education. The headlines have been bleak. Timely, however, as this week we are also expanded in our education team, welcoming specialist correspondent Garrett Stell to allow us to deliver further on the promise we made last summer to you, our readers, to cover education differently and properly. Our most recent headlines show how great the need is for full and meaningful coverage of the sector produced by specialist writers. Stell was introduced to readers on Thursday and will now join former teacher, author and education writer James McKerney, who's spearheaded our coverage in recent months. He's an experienced education specialist, most recently having worked in the Highlands, and has been writing occasionally for us in recent months. Originally from the US, he offers a perspective on Scotland's education system, which I believe will be valuable, while, of course, sharing McKinney's passion to steer change. This week, Stell broke the story that growing numbers of children from disadvantaged backgrounds are starting school unable to talk properly, prompting concerns over the financing and availability of speech and language therapy. Meanwhile, McKinney broke the story that a groundbreaking hub in Glasgow, which allows pupils to study for advanced hires not offered at their schools, is under threat of closure. We also launched Lessons to Learn, our latest newsletter written by McKinney and to be published every Thursday evening. Each week, McKinney will keep readers up to date on what is happening in the sector, discuss our latest stories, and preview what work we are looking at over the coming days. We choose to break the story of the future of the Advanced Higher Hub at Glasgow Caledonian University in the newsletter, so signing up is a must for anyone with an interest in the sector. These are just a few examples of our work around Scottish education this week, signalling our ongoing commitment to not only being the first with news, but to leading the conversations that matter around the headlines. In light of the Scottish Government cutting funding to Scottish universities, the equivalent of 1,200 student places, we did just that. McKinney was first with analysis and explanation. Columnist Rebecca McQuillan called for much wider discussions about the future of higher education funding. And today, controversially, for many, columnist Andy McIver poses the question that perhaps is in fact time for Scots to start paying tuition fees. Get editors' pick straight to your inbox every Friday. Education is the foundation of society. The Herald is committed to telling the stories of both good and bad, pushing the conversations further, directing discussions that look for solutions. We share our readers' ambitions for Scotland and understand the responsibility we have when it comes to getting our coverage of education right. We have so much planned for the coming year. Join us. And that's by Catherine Salmond. The Herald on the 19th of January and the Voices section. Trump's Iowa win and Sunak's attack on Starmer set election tone, by Katrina Stewart. I was trying to find that famous line from Bill Bryson when he writes about his hometown, Des Moines, Iowa, This was it. I came from Des Moines, his novel, The Lost Continent, opens. Somebody had to. There's a sign outside the town, he jokes, that reads, "Welcome to Des Moines. This is what death is like." I'm writing this at 2 a.m. GMT, and the Associated Press has just called the Iowa caucus for Donald Trump a record 30-point margin. Before being buoyed by this predictable but awful electoral victory, Trump seemed to feel that Iowa really is what death is like. Before the voting opened for the first test in the US elections nomination race, he posted a video complaining about the sub-zero temperatures. "You guys have the worst weather in the state." If he hadn't been otherwise occupied with his fraud trial in New York, he might have arrived earlier to less inclement times. Miss Bryson has a caustic tongue, not least when describing the place of his birth, but there is a humour to it and an undercurrent of fondness that lets him off the hook. Trump, though, has none such. His signature nastiness has already begun and cannot be leashed. Trump, age 77, is going after Joe Biden's age, posting pictures of the 81-year-old on social media looking frail with a pop at the White House Senior Living Center. He has made fun of disabilities, been appalling on race, misogynistic about women, and on and on. As the UK election looks ever more likely to be towards the end of the year, though rule nothing out and close to a US election, expect the news cycle for the next 10 months to be filled with nastiness. Conservatives here have set the tone. Their Better Call Saul-themed attack advert against Keir Starmer, released on Wednesday, is a grim bit of kit. The Labour leader was criminal defence barrister who, gasp, defended criminals. This fact is going to be a drum banged by the Tories until Starmer's inevitable takeover of Downing Street. In this instance, Starmer advised the Islamist group Hizb ut-Tahrir, soon to be banned by Sunak, during his legal career. "Are you a terrorist in need of legal advice? Better call Keir," the Tory attack advert on Twitter/X reads. When Rishi Sunak sees a group chanting jihad in our streets, he bans them. Keir Starmer invoices them. I mean, it's a nice line, but it's also nonsense. The Tories are supposed to be the party of law and order, but don't really seem to appreciate how the legal system functions. Right to a failed trial, anyone? But there are themes here. The dreaded Rwanda plan suggests a conservative government with loose relationship to the law. Rwanda, not a safe country. Sod it. We'll just pass legislation declaring that it is. Concerned about the European Court of Human Rights, let's just keep referring to it as a foreign court and hope that those we're targeting hear the dog whistle. But lads, it's not a foreign court. It's an international court. There's quite a stark difference. Better call Keir. It's that perfect 3-word catchy slogan, like "Stop the Boats." Stop the Boats is a clever slogan because it unites all sides. Who doesn't want to stop the boats? If you're a bleeding heart lefty liberal, you want to stop the boats because you crave the establishment of legal routes into the country. If you're xenophobic, far-right nut, you want to stop the boats because you don't want those filthy foreigners coming here and taking our jobs, women, university, places. If you're somewhere in the middle, you still want to stop the boats to see an end to people drowning in the freezing waters of the English Channel. Take back control was another. Trump's was take back America and fight like hell. Was Penny Mordaunt echoing him when she exhorted Britons to stand up and fight? To the barricades, Britain. That the right manipulates voters' fears in order to persuade them to support madness like Brexit, like the Rwanda policy, is nothing new, but we are about to be saturated in it. Keir Starmer, in his recent New Year's speech, made an appeal to moderation. He promised voters that he would establish a new kind of politics that treads lightly through people's lives. No more populism, no more having to find the energy to be furious at the monster of the week. His speech was paraphrased as saying was that once the grown-ups are back in charge, we will all be able to relax a little, engage less, let the adults make the big decisions. I understood it slightly differently. we must engage as intimately with politics, but do so in an intellectual manner, not an emotional manner. That's a big ask. Visceral reactions to outrageous ideas are easy because they require less thought. There has become a base level of cruelty embedded in politics. So Keir Starmer promises us hope. Perhaps hope we'll have. Before then, things are only going to become worse before they become better. Can one side change the narrative if the other side persists in meanness? It's a task. Will voters be lured by decency, or do they want excitement too? Keir Starmer is no Tony Blair. People complain of lack of mood akin to the lively, excitable scenes of the 1997 Labour landslide. Excitement is too much to ask from both Starmer and the electorate. Relief is about the best we can muster. The late Roy Jenkins famously said that in opposition, Blair was like a man carrying a priceless Ming vase across a highly polished floor. Keir Starmer is carrying a priceless vase too, but the floor is not his only problem. He also has to dodge the brickbats twanging from the slingshots of opponents with nothing left to lose, not even their dignity. Among voters, cynicism about politics and politicians run deep. Fears over economic uncertainty are high. Exhaustion from, well, everything is in the bones. Starmer can talk about re-establishing hope, but it's not clear how he's going to do it. He's hamstrung from making expensive policy promises, and he's already trailed the fact that not everyone will be able to have what they want. That's democracy, he said. Hope seems a bold pledge. Compassion seems a naive wish. We must gird ourselves for thoroughly depressing electoral campaigns and hope for the best, which is that we aren't about to see even worse than we've ever seen before. And that was by Katrina Stewart. The Herald on the 19th of January and the Voices section. Tuition fees. Scotland will have to bite the bullet and follow England, by Andy McIver. If policy success were measured in good intentions, then the vast majority of governments in developed countries would be able to thumpingly laud a near universal record of success. Very few, perhaps none, attempt to do wrong, but good intentions are not enough, and that is why policy often fails. The test of all governments, at or near that point of failure, is how they respond. Do they double down, or do they just hold their hands up? The Scottish Government is rapidly nearing such a moment in the area of university tuition. University tuition for the governing SNP and for all of its opponents has become an intractable issue. It is one of those policy areas which has been permanently hot for a quarter of a century, since its limited introduction of fees by the first Blair government in 1998. The level of debate on tuition fees has been, to put it charitably, primitive, less charitably, hysterical. I know from my time helping to create party policy a couple of decades ago that the Conservatives were petrified of taking what they believed to be sensible and sustainable position on tuition fees, and as an outsider looking at that party's policy today, it seems little has changed. Labour and the Liberal Democrats both have their own tuition fee scar tissue from their times in government. The SNP, learning a political lesson, if not an economic or social one, treats tuition fees as a semi-religious shibboleth. Alex Salmond's boulder may have been removed from the grounds of Heriot-Watt University, but its words, "The rocks will melt with the sun before I allow tuition fees to be imposed on Scotland's students," remains etched in metaphorical stone. It is a challenge in that political environment to make sensible decisions, and even more of a challenge to change course when a populist policy fails. And yet, there are clear signs that Scotland's free tuition policy, otherwise known as funded by taxpayers, is failing. The starting point to our debate is based on a misunderstanding, sometimes witless and sometimes willful, of how tuition fees work at universities south of the border. Contrary to the received wisdom, universities in England do not man the gates when freshers arrive, wielding card machines and demanding they empty their pockets and pawn their watches before they enter a lecture theatre. In fact, university in England is, to coin a phrase from another public service, free at the point of use. Students at English universities pay absolutely nothing for their tuition until they earn over £25,000. And only 9% on all earnings above that level. So a graduate earning, say, £35,000 will pay 9% of £10,000 every year, or around £75 per month. They will probably pay more for their Sky subscription. The more they earn, the more they pay, and those who earn the most as a result of the opportunities their university degree has created will probably repay their whole loan before the 40-year expiry date at which it is wiped out without consequence. At least half, according to the government projections, will never repay the loan because they will never earn enough to do so. Tuition fees in England are therefore the dictionary definition of win-win. Logic would dictate that in Scotland students and graduates are even better off since they enjoy all of the gain with none of the pain. Alas, no. The consequences of the Scottish Government's free tuition policy have been highlighted again by its decision to make cost savings by reducing the number of first-year university places it chooses to fund. There is a perfect storm afoot. Governments for decades have had a strategy of prioritising, pushing more school leavers towards university rather than college or the job market. Augmenting that, substantial grade inflation at higher exam level has expanded the number of students meeting the entry criteria. And yet, the available spaces are limited by politics. Governments are in control of how many free places they will fund. And economics, universities to stay afloat are forced to expand the number of non-Scottish and therefore fee-paying students. For Scottish children who attend independent school or whose postcode does not meet social deprivation criteria, the government's attempts to engineer preferential treatment for those historically excluded makes the path even more challenging. Crowds of aspirational students are trying to cram through the door marked Scottish kids, only to find it closed before they reach the front of the queue. There's an obvious consequence, which is already evident particularly amongst the best and brightest students who wish to study the most sought-after degrees. They go south. They go south and they stay south. They settle south. They marry south. They have children south. They live south and they pay taxes south. Scotland loses them in what can be thought of as an accidental brain drain at exactly the time we can't afford it, with an expanding non-working population being subsidised by a contracting working population. What to do? Well, we could do nothing, stick with the current policy and cross our fingers, and in truth that is precisely what the government is likely to do. Or we could have sensible conversation amongst the politicians and the electorate. Perhaps we might fund some tuition through our taxes and ask graduates to pay the rest, even if that were a stepping stone to full funding. Perhaps we would be prepared to fund some high-value degrees but not others, if we deem them economically and strategically critical. Perhaps we would allow those Scottish children who miss out on a free place to choose to pay fees to a Scottish university rather than forcing them to pay fees to an English university. We have options to make this better, and none of them punish students or graduates. They will be fine, either because they are earning enough to repay their fees or because they are not earning enough and therefore never repay their fees. However, let us make our starting point that we want to keep young Scots who want to be in Scotland in Scotland. The harsh realities of running a country are beginning to smack devolved Scotland in the face. We must respond maturely. And that was by Andy McIver.
From the Herald Scotland, Tuesday the 23rd of January, from the news section, Scottish public sector workers trial 4-day working week. This article is by political editor Tom Gordon. Scottish public sector workers have started working a 4-day week to test whether the practice could be rolled out countrywide. The Scottish Government confirmed a pilot was underway involving around 140 staff at South of Scotland Enterprise doing a 32-hour week without loss of pay. Although this represents only 3 hours less per week, the shift to 4-day working is seen as key to changing people's work-life balance. The move follows Hamza Yousaf announcing the experiment as part of his programme for government last September. It was confirmed in a written parliamentary answer by Economy Secretary Neil Gray. He said, "Work has commenced on the 4-day working week public sector pilot to assess the well-being, environmental and productivity benefits a 4-day working week could bring. We have appointed think tank Autonomy as our expert partner to support the pilot. The team involved in this project have previous 4-day working week pilot experience, including from the Valencian government pilot and the Icelandic public sector pilot. The South of Scotland Enterprise 4-day working week Pathfinder work has been folded into Autonomy's methodology, and engagement will continue with other public bodies interested in participating in the 32-hour working week pilot. Autonomy will also provide support and evaluate organisations moving to a contractual 35-hour working week. This will capture valuable insights from a wider range of public bodies on different shorter work week models and be included in the 4-day working week evaluation report. The pilot is expected to run around 12 months to see if it can be extended across the Scottish public sector and inspire the private sector to adopt it. In 2022, a 6-month pilot involving 61 companies employing 2,900 people in the UK ended with 56 of the firms reporting they would continue with the system, 18 permanently. Employees reported feeling less stressed, anxious, fatigued and sleepless afterwards, while company revenues stayed broadly the same or higher. Almost 1 in 6 employees said they would not accept a return to a 5-day week. Green MSP Ross Greer, whose question elicited the information, said normalising a 4-day working week with no loss of pay would transform workers' health and well-being. Mr Greer, whose party has had a 4-day week for staff since 2022, said, "The 4-day working week has a transformative impact on the work-life balance, health and happiness. It means people can spend more time with their families, friends and loved ones, and it helps employers retain staff and boost productivity. We have seen the benefits for ourselves, including better job satisfaction and a reduction in stress. The Scottish Government is rightly leading by example with these pilots. They will provide a lot of useful evidence and lessons which will in turn help other sectors and businesses to make the shift." Will Strong, Director of Research at Autonomy, said, "We are very pleased to be working with the Scottish Government on this historic trial. Alongside those who are already underway with the pilot and others who have already expressed interest, we will be looking to sign up a number of public sector organisations as the year progresses. A 4-day week with no loss of pay has been trialled extensively across the private sector and parts of the public sector to great success. It's important that we find out if it can also work in public sector organisations in Scotland." Joe Rowell, Director of the 4-day week campaign, added, "Numerous trials and pilots from across the world have shown that a 4-day week with no loss of pay increases productivity and improves work-life balance. It is working extremely well for many businesses in the private sector, so it's only right and fair to see if those benefits can be applied to the public sector. 100 years ago we moved from a 6-day week to a 5-day week. It's great to see Scotland now leading the charge towards a 4-day week." And that article was by political editor Tom Gordon. From the Herald Scotland, Tuesday the 23rd of January. From the news section, Slater's plans for charge on single-use cups dismissed by business. Article by political correspondent Kathleen Nutt. Plans by Circular Economy Minister Lorna Slater for a charge on single-use coffee cups will be opposed by business organisations, MSPs are being told. Tourism trade body, the Scottish Tourism Alliance, STA, revealed its concerns over proposed legislation for the levy in a submission to Holyrood's Economy and Fair Work Committee, which is due to discuss the proposals tomorrow. The Scottish Government wants to do more to cut down on waste and set out what has been called the latte tax in its Circular Economy and Waste Route Map to 2030 consultation document published last week. However, the SDA warns that the new charge would hit small drink suppliers who have already been badly affected by increased costs due to inflation and a downturn in customers due to the cost of living crisis. It said it opposes any new legislation to require suppliers to add such a charge. The SDA welcomes the creation of a circular economy strategy, but does not believe there is a need to introduce a statutory requirement to deliver it, the SDA said in its submission. The SDA does not support the introduction of new regulations that would give Scottish ministers the power to legally require suppliers of goods to apply charges to single-use items, including single-use beverage cups. Unfortunately, this would be viewed as another burden on business, despite the efforts of many to support the net zero and circular economy agendas. The document added, a major campaign and drive from the Scottish Government is instead needed to support businesses to make the changes necessary to introduce a new charge on single use, with the tourism and hospitality sector having made significant strides over recent years since the ban on single-use plastics. Along with the visitor levy charge for visitors, a charge on single-use cups and other items will once again hit visitors' pockets. It is impracticable to expect tourists visiting Scotland to pack a reusable cup or other forms of reusable food storage items, especially international visitors flying to the country. It will also likely impact on those who attend events such as music concerts and festivals, winter markets, all-day conventions, conferences and other business events. Mark Crothall, Chief Executive of Scottish Tourism Alliance, Leon Thompson, Executive Director, UK Hospitality, and Colin Wilkinson, Managing Director of the Scottish Licensed Trade Association, will give evidence to the committee tomorrow. UK Hospitality also criticised the plan for the charge on single-use drinks cup in its submission to the committee. It said, Circular Economy Bill. This is another piece of legislation with limited detail, but that will clearly impact on our businesses. A key aspect is the power for ministers to introduce a charge on single-use items. The conversation has, so far, revolved around a charge on single-use cups, hitting food-to-go businesses. The Scottish Government's document said a charge on single-use disposable cups in a bid to eradicate their use. It said, a charge or ban on unnecessary products provides a strong incentive to choose reusable alternatives or to avoid certain products altogether. Unveiling the consultation, Ms Slater said, we have already made good progress across Scotland, significantly reducing the amount of waste we generate in landfill. But we need to go further if reusing and recycling goods is to become the default choice for households, businesses and the public sector. Announcing plans for a charge on single-use cups back in 2022, Ms Slater said, single-use coffee cups are a classic example of the throwaway culture that we're taking action to tackle. Lots of people already carry a reusable cup with them, but hundreds of millions of single-use cups are still being wasted every single year. Evidence shows that a small charge on a single-use cups can be hugely effective in encouraging people to switch to a reusable alternative. Kim Pratt of Friends of the Earth Scotland said last week the government's plan lacked sufficient urgency. She said, the waste route map does not contain the required urgency or the systematic approach needed to reduce the way we use materials, risking another Scottish Government failure, just as it is failing to meet its 2025 recycling targets. And that article was by Kathleen Nutt and read today by me, Ian.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, and review, tell your friends about our service.